Natalia.
And I'm Brian.
And we're the Daily Plant.
And today we're going to be making a terrarium for the peacock begonia, also known as Begonia pavonina. So what's really well known about this plant is that the leaves are iridescent blue, which is really cool.
Terrariums are really cool if you want to control the environment of your plant. For example, with the terrarium, you can control for factors such as humidity, which is really important with this plant because it's a tropical plant that likes a lot of humidity. It is really important to keep in mind, though, that with the terrarium, you can get contamination really easily, so that's something to watch out for.
So, as we said earlier, the interesting thing about this plant is that the leaves are iridescent blue, which has to do with something called structural variation. So you'll notice in nature we don't see a lot of blue, and that's because the pigment that a lot of organisms use to capture blue light and reflect blue light back out is very energetically expensive to produce. So what these guys actually do is they have a very particular structure of their thylakoids, which is a microstructure within their actual chloroplasts, that allows them to refract light in a way that makes the leaves look like they have an iridescent blue sheen.
To make the terrarium, you're going to need a container for the terrarium, disinfectant to disinfect things, filtered water, rocks, perlite, activated charcoal, and soilless mix.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to want to do is actually get the soil itself ready. So as we said, this is soilless potting mix, which is mostly just peat moss and wetting agents. And the reason that we want to use soilless mix instead of regular potting soil is that it's a lot less prone to things like fungal infections, fungus gnats, and other weird things that might cause the terrarium to get contaminated. So the first thing we're going to want to do, keeping in mind contamination is our biggest concern, is to disinfect everything. And we're just going to take the bowl that we're going to put this stuff in while we're getting it ready. And we're going to just disinfect it as best as we can. Alright, so first things first, like I said, we're going to take a bunch of this stuff, put it in here. Oh. No. I'd say this is a good amount. And we're going to take our water and just wet it a little bit. Now ideally, if you were to have RO water or DO water, and that's reverse osmosis or distilled water, you should use that. We don't, so what we're going to use instead of just water that's been run through a Brita filter. Not an ideal option, but it's the best we could find. Put a little bit in here. So the soil consistency we want to get is we want it to be wet enough to the point where the soil has a nice firm, essentially if you could pack it like a snowball, but we don't want it to be so wet that if you squeeze it, water drips out. So I'm actually going to go and get a spoon to mix this because I shouldn't be doing it with my hands. We're going to go ahead and disinfect the spoon as well. Everything as clean as we can get it. And we're just going to try to mix this water into the soil. So what we're actually going to do next is one of two things. So we're going to sterilize the soil, and one of the ways to do that is if you have neem oil, spelled N-E-E-M. That's actually a well-known fungicide that you can just pour right into the soil and you'll be good to go. If you don't have it, like us, what you're going to do instead is take this bowl, pop it in the microwave, and microwave it until it becomes too hot to touch, and this will kill any bacteria, moss, or fungal spores inside of it. So I'll be right back. Alright, so now while that's going, we can start worrying about the other layers of our terrarium. That's actually going to be the last one we put in here. So I have that microwave for about 40 minutes, that should kill everything inside of it. And in the meantime, we're going to disinfect this guy. So we're going to be working with overall 4 different layers inside of this terrarium. The bottom one is going to be aquarium pebbles, and that's because there's a lot of space in between those pebbles so water can drain nicely to the bottom, and you're not going to have to worry about water pooling in the other layers of your mix. Then on top of that, we're going to have activated charcoal. Activated charcoal works really nicely to filter bad stuff out of the water and out of the soil, and it also helps to fight infection. Then we're going to put perlite on top of that. Perlite is this white stuff here that you see often in potting soils, and its main function is to it essentially buffers the amount of water in the soil and retains a nice humid environment while also providing nice loosely draining soil. And then on top of that goes our soilless mix. Alright, so this is our first layer. Like I said, the soil is going to serve as a nice draining output for all the water that might accumulate in the upper layers. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our activated charcoal, and this is the type of charcoal that you'll typically find, for example, in aquarium filters. Alright, so we're just going to pour a whole bunch of this in there. If you can get about a 1/2 inch layer of activated charcoal, you'll be good. Go ahead and actually disperse this stuff a little. So you can go ahead and use the whole thing. Well, I don't want to breathe that in. Next we have our perlite. I don't know what this is used for. Also adds a nice little white color pop. And lastly we have our soilless potting mix. Nalu, no. Alright kid, get out of here. Alright, so as you can see we have our steaming potting mix, right? And we're not going to waste too much time while it's sitting out here, otherwise it's going to cool and we're going to have spores re-entering it, which we do not want. So I'm going to go ahead, re-disinfect our spoon. Might actually need a little more than we poured out currently. See if I have to go and make more. And just carefully, because it's super hot, spoon it into the terrarium. Alright, so your soil is finally cooled down enough, because remember, if you put this in too hot, then it'll shock the roots and probably kill the plant. So once this is cooled down enough, we're actually going to put this guy in there. So I'm just going to go through and do a little hole. And remember, this entire time your hands should be clean, right? So as you can see, this is mainly because the soil is still a little bit warm, but it's already a very humid environment in here. So now as far as the actual care of these guys go, you're going to want to make sure to give it some airflow every now and then just to prevent mold from building up. So what we're going to do is, even though I'm actually going to cover this, every now and then, probably about once a week, you're going to want to take the cover off and let it sit for about an hour before you put the cover back on. That way you can release a lot of the potential humidity that's been building up in there. You can kind of free it of any spores that might be floating around on the inside. You can kind of give the plant a chance to breathe, because these guys do like a lot of ventilation. And then as far as light goes, remember, as with any enclosed structure, do not put it in direct sunlight because that'll cause a greenhouse effect that'll probably kill the plant because of too much heat. Turns out with these guys, this particular species, if you want the iridescence to get stronger, you put it in shade because that actually causes it to do this process more efficiently. It actually causes a brighter iridescent blue. So put it in probably mild to partial shade, really not much light. Honestly, like a fluorescent room might even do it. And yeah.